I'm Mikki, and this is Mikkipedia, where I sit down and chat to doctors, professors, athletes, practitioners, and experts in their fields related to health, nutrition, fitness, and well-being. And I'm delighted that you're here. Morning everyone, hope you're having a fab week, start of August, which is always like the start of spring here in Auckland. The nights are getting a little bit longer and the mornings are getting a little bit lighter, which is always awesome. I mean, I don't doubt that we've still got a bit of rubbish weather on our way, but at the moment the sun is shining and I'm super stoked about that. So today on the podcast, I'm really pleased to bring to you a conversation that I had with my awesome friend, Dr. Caryn Zinn, who is a senior lecturer and registered dietitian at AUT University. And Caryn and I worked together for a number of years, and she's always been she's like my travel wife. We used to travel to conferences together and things like that, and we have a similar approach to nutrition. Not everything, but a similar approach to nutrition. So Caryn fielded questions from her audience, and then we sat down and discussed her approach to a number of different topics. And those are things such as collagen intake, diet recommendations for autoimmune conditions, what to eat when you're craving sweets on a keto approach, what differences you may make for keto if someone is going through menopause, low carb diets for hypertension, and recommendations for people who are trying to bulk up. We also discuss oxalates, foods that affect thyroid function, and protein powders and their appropriate use for someone who is sustaining a weight loss approach. And also we discuss the book What the Face, and those of you in the low carb scene will know that Caryn is a co-author on the What the Fat book series. So we discuss what you can expect from the new book in the series. Now, Caryn and I discuss Monday's Matter in our conversation, and as we were a few weeks into the first round of that program, and in fact, spring edition of Monday's Matter, registrations for that open next week. So it's sort of timely, really. And like I was saying with regards to spring being in the air, what better time to jump on board a program that you get that group support, you get support from me, and you get a load of fresh ideas and really tasty way to sort of improve your body composition as we head into summer. So definitely keep an eye out for that. In addition to that, this podcast also talks about protein powders, and alongside that, my friends at Balance Sports Nutrition are doing a bit of a giveaway for our New Zealand audience. So check out the Facebook page for more details on that when you see me talk about this podcast. And before we get into the interview, if you're wanting to support the podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform app and give us a rating. That would be awesome. Share it with your mates, would really appreciate it. I also now have a recipe-only access plan to my online subscriber site where you get access to over 600 recipes, a weekly Q&A forum with me over on Facebook, and also the ability to kind of pick my brain through that online platform for any of your nutrition-related queries. In addition to that, I do of course have my meal plans available, the Keto Longevity Plan, the Real Food Nutrition Plan, and the Athlete Plan, which has all of what I've just mentioned, in addition to a 28-day meal plan per month and shopping lists. And of course you can book a consultation with me through my website as well, and you'll find that at mikkywilliden.com. So without further delay, please enjoy this conversation that I have with Dr. Caryn Zinn. Dr. Caryn Zinn.
Dr. Mikki Williden.
How are you?
I'm great, how are you?
Do you know, hilariously, I actually feel a little bit nervous about doing this in person with you.
Well, funny, my heart rate's just gone up now too, so thanks for that.
You need a beta blocker, don't you?
Oh, maybe.
So you are the second in-person podcast that I have done, and listeners of the show will remember that I spoke to Sean Collins, which was published a couple of months ago now. And we sat here and had a good old yarn about his running exposés, him circumnavigating Auckland, being amazing, endurance training, which is going to be quite a different conversation to the one that you and I are going to have.
Wow, I'm sure it is. And I will definitely go back, and it's next on my list to listen to, actually. So I do wonder, did you have as delicious a lunch with him as you have with me?
No, but we did enjoy a few craft beers afterwards because we had a barbecue.
Oh,
I know.
so lucky. It was probably a bit early today.
A little bit early. And also, Baz and I are doing Mindful May.
And that means what exactly?
Being mindful of beer and hot chips and bread. So when I text you about our breakfast that you were coming over, I did not want you to bring pastries or sourdough or anything delicious, which usually I would be more than happy to, have a taste, have a bit of, in addition to a delicious breakfast.
That's great. But have you ever known me to bring a pastry?
Well, I just don't know. No, actually, no. But you would have been a sourdough bread girl.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So instead, you bought halloumi and delicious roast peppers.
Yeah, it's my thing at the moment.
I know, it's lovely.
Yeah, and how is your Mindful May?
Well, Mindful May started off with Barry and Mikki Mikki telling Barry that we were going to go carnivore for a month. Only purely because curiosity, which is why we do anything. Because there's no health-related issue that I need to address, which would require the complete elimination of all plant material.
I'm so glad you said that. It's clarifying.
Yes. And I literally lasted 2 days, less than 2 days.
So I'm really intrigued to know why you only lasted two days.
And I think it's a great question because looking back, I am also wondering why on earth could I not tough that out even for 4 days, but I obviously, so we got back we'd both been down to Whakapapa National Park. Barry had just won the off-road marathon which was great. Yeah. And I limped in on the 24K because I blew my calf, which I should not have even entered the 24 knowing that I had calf issues, but
live and learn.
And we thought we wanted to go lower carb and just sort of help with recovery, not go gung-ho on food that's just going to create additional stress on the body and create oxidative damage, and help with the recovery, particularly as we're getting older. And I thought, well, I've sort of ummed and ahed about just trying an animal-only protein diet. Can I get rid of veggies? Because you know me, Caryn.
You're a vegetable queen. Because I remember us talking about doing this, and I just wasn't that keen.
Yeah, and I was mildly disappointed that you weren't. And Baz is great. He's like, oh, so what are we doing? Okay, cool. I can do that.
It's just dinner, but minus 3/4 of your plate.
I know. Which I wonder if I could handle that. And it was weird, just a couple of days, and we had eggs, salmon, steak, mince. I had a lot of chicken, and then by Tuesday dinner, legit less than 2 days into it, I'm like, Baz, I don't think I can do it. I just was really grumpy. And it wasn't an electrolyte issue because and I'm always good about taking my element electrolytes. I love them. They're delicious. And so I'd had 3 sachets. I did actually think to myself, this is going to be expensive if I'm tracking down these sachets of electrolytes plus buying all of this animal protein. But I just couldn't do it, Caryn.
Probably because you missed vegetables too much. Because, there's lots of variety within animal foods and animal protein, but... I think I'd struggle.
Yeah, in part, do you know what? And I was listening to another podcast where a girl said she went carnivore for 3 weeks, and she relayed her experience. And in her description of her carnivore diet, she had 4 pieces of fruit a day.
Hello, that's not the carnivore diet.
There's 150 grams of carbs. And I'm like, come on, could you not even tough that? So I was very dismissive of her experience, yet lasted 36 hours.
Yeah. I don't know. I like I said to you earlier, I'd love to try just to get like uber lean for a little while.
Yeah.
And to look in the mirror and go, wow, I'm so lean. But I'd miss vegetables. I'd miss raw cooked vegetables, all of that stuff.
I know.
And I also do wonder about the microbiome. I know it changes within, 48 hours, and all we really know is that it changes. We don't know if it changes for the better or for worse. It just changes. And I'm a big fan of, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And I always worry that if I do something like carnivore just to play around and see what happens, and then I come back to normal, and if it doesn't, if like getting back to normal doesn't feel quite right, and then suddenly I've got this gut issue because of something I changed that I didn't really need to change. I'm like, why did I do that?
That's such a good point, actually, because a lot of people experience that change in how their gut responds to food when they eliminate something, be it dairy, be it gluten, like the real low-hanging fruit. And they're like, I had no idea I had this reaction. And we have to remind them, actually, it might not necessarily be that you had a negative impact of that particular food. It could be, but actually it could just be that change in the microbiome.
Yeah.
What I will say though is that Dr. Tommy Woods, who has been on the show, and Lucy Mailing, she's very smart in that area, and you'll, I'm sure, know of this study. They just published I think it was a narrative review looking at the metabolic flexibility of the gut and the impact of an animal only diet and how and what implications that might have. So I'm hoping to chat to Lucy actually about her paper or about that paper.
That'd be really cool. I mean, the whole microbiome is so interesting. We know so little. Yeah. We just know that it changes. And gosh, there's so much out there that we're going to find out, but I just don't know how much we can say at the moment. And particularly with, dare I say, normal people. Like, again, I'll get back to that. If it's not broken, don't try and fix it. So if I go back to the whole carnivore thing, so for us, certainly wasn't a health reason at all. It was more curiosity. Yeah. But I know loads of people actually feel a whole lot better when they do the elimination approach and they eliminate right down to just that animal protein. And I know it makes a marked difference. And of course there are those anecdotes of people who've been living years with no plant material. Yeah, and you and I are both totally on the same page when it comes to that individuality. And you would absolutely knock it as a population-based approach. But for individual, like some people take plants out and their health improves. Yeah. Other people take animals out and their health improves. Yeah, so, how do you explain that? Yeah. Other than just respecting that everyone responds slightly differently to something, you can't be in a situation where you knock things. Yeah, agree. Yeah. So our carnivore approach turned into Mindful May. Right, okay, so getting back to the original Mindful May, which ended up being, well, we've probably been having a lot more beer than we need to lately. And I say a lot, and I don't mean that we have we sit down to a 6-pack every night or anything, but when we do enjoy beer, I just really enjoy those higher alcohol ones from the Garage Project. Oh, okay. And I get a personalised email every Tuesday into my inbox. Oh my God. And so I'm continuing to order beer that we are not drinking. I'd love to say I totally know where you're at, but I don't, because I don't drink beer. Yeah. However, there are other alcoholic beverages that I like. Confession from time to time. Yeah. And then so there's the beer. So it's no beer, no fries, because we do enjoy getting Mikki fries from Little Creatures. Yes. And we do that on average once a week, or maybe once a fortnight on average, which is actually not excessive at all in my book. No, it's not. But I think what happens sometimes is that when you're not mindful of what you're doing, you then also go, I'll just have that piece of cake at morning tea, or I'll just grab an additional handful of, I don't know, insert favourite lollies or candy or something here. Now, I don't do that. This is more for Barry than me. I'm perfect. Shh, don't let him hear you. I know. He'll probably edit that bit out. So that's what Mindful May is. And also it is around alcohol intake as well. So we're like, right,
let's try to, because of course we will still enjoy red wine, let's try to just increase the number of alcohol-free days a week. Because it's actually really easy for that to start sort of your AFD days to diminish. Yeah. Because you're out for a drink here, absolutely, you're doing something here, and then suddenly you have had 5 days in a row of having 1 to 2 glasses of wine.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of alcohol-free days. I really am. Really am.
In part, it makes me feel virtuous.
It does. It totally does. And you know, if and when I'm offered like a wine on a weekday when I'm at home, oh honey, would you like a wine? Yeah, of course I'd like a wine, but I'm not going to have one. Yeah. Because it can turn into a habit before you say boo. Yeah. So I quite like, I know this might sound a bit warped, but I quite like being restrictive so that when I do have a wine on the weekend, it's just beautiful.
No, I 100% agree. And I talked to a client about this week actually about food rules. Yeah. And how there is actually freedom in food rules. Because sometimes if you don't place any considerations about what you do day to day, then you can, and it's not what you intend to do, you just find that that's what's happening, then you actually can feel a little bit out of control and a little bit lost, and that's where structure can really help. Oh yeah, for sure. And having those rules, so when you do have it, you don't then suddenly feel that wash of shame or of guilt or whatever can occur when you have something. And I know that both you and I will have clients who report to us that that's how they feel if they have a piece of cake or they have that additional wine.
Absolutely. And there are rules, and then there are rules within rules. You know, some people like really, really strong rules, and other people like rules that are a little bit lax. But you know, there's a spectrum, and of course you feed off your clients' personality and history and all that, and you develop rules accordingly. So it's a real balance, a real fine line between creating rules that will just push people over the top and just you know, so they feel super, super restrictive and they can only do it for 2 weeks and that's that, or a set of nice, gentle but strict rules that will keep them on the straight and narrow without them going either way. Does that make sense, or am I just rambling?
No, totally makes sense. And in part, you know, you and I mean, we talk like this all the time, but I spent, you know, my personality is so interesting. So I spent a good 4 to 5 months of tracking everything I ate last year.
Oh my God, how tiring.
No, and at the time, it didn't feel tiring at all. I felt empowered by it.
Awesome.
I'm like, this is awesome. Now I know, you know, I really need to bump up my protein. I know how to do it. This is the number of calories that I know I need to hit if I'm going to, you know, meet my protein macros and continue to maintain my weight where it is, and also perform the way I want. So in some ways it felt really liberating. It was almost like a goal, a target to hit, rather than a place to make sure I restrict to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
However, and then, as is so often the case with me, one morning I woke up and went, I cannot be asked doing that anymore. And I haven't done it since. It hasn't really changed anything of what I've done, but it was just that idea. It was just that whole looking at macros and viewing food in a different way, because despite the fact that I've been a practitioner for over 20 years, I don't work in calories, or I hadn't until this point worked in calories, worked with clients counting their macros. And what I found was really good learning for me, and also how I now approach with some clients, not all, and Dr. Eric Helms and I spoke of this in our podcast, is that if you're aware of your macros, you can then use that information to allow for more flexibility and freedom on certain days, and feel really comfortable in that space because you know you've pulled back a little bit during the week. So your calorie budget is the same, but you almost calorie cycle.
Yeah, totally. Offsetting.
Yeah. And it was, you know, and I see it now all the time on my social media, because of course when you start to adopt a different way of doing things, you then go to Instagram and find other people who are doing similar to learn from them. And, you know, you and I are always learning from people that we follow and clients that we have, and things like that.
Half the learning comes from the client.
Yeah, it really does. And so, I learned a lot following these girls who just do this day in, day out, to the point where I've had to unfollow a lot of people because it's very boring. But it's been really eye-opening, actually.
Cool.
Yeah.
Just one more question for you, just while we gossiping. How is your Monday's Matter program going?
Oh, Caryn, it is amazing. Like, I have been so enjoying seeing sort of what I put down on paper come to life in the group.
Brilliant.
It has been so rewarding to see these, and I would say probably 70% women, 30% men.
Okay.
The women are far more vocal than the men, but seeing the meals, people taking pictures of their meals, people sharing their kind of day experiences, the support that I'm seeing from the group as well. Like, we're going in and people are like, how are we feeling on our protein sparing modified fast day? And
that's great. You're building a little Monday community.
Yeah, totally.
That's great.
Of course, you and I just finished having as part of our breakfast some protein sparing modified fast bread.
It was great.
It wasn't bad, was it?
It was really good. In fact, I want the recipe, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for those people who haven't heard of this bread, legit, it is egg whites, it is protein powder. I only had vanilla. It would be a savoury one had I had unflavoured, or at least not vanilla flavoured. And whilst the promise of puff was there when it was baking in the oven, it very quickly deflated.
Yeah, I'm not sure I had a puffy slice. No. It was still delicious.
Yeah, it was really delicious, and really it has been popularised by Maria Emmerich.
Right, okay.
And so listeners of the podcast will know I spoke to Craig Emmerich all about his, not only his Lyme disease and how he manages it with diet, but his and Maria's work in that ketogenic space and in that protein sparing modified fast space. So that is in part some of the inspiration for Monday's Matter.
Cool.
And just trying to find solutions for people who are looking for another tool in the toolbox to help with fat loss. And that's what the program is. And so people are loving it. They're getting great results. And I'm definitely thinking of ways to tweak it. So next round, come at it just for the same program, but just make some minor adjustments to suit people.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
You should call it Monday's Matter More.
Monday's Matter More. yeah. That's brilliant.
Or not.
That's version 2, right?
Yeah.
And first, Caryn, so obviously I'm going to do a bio for listeners who may not be familiar with you, but you're so well known in the low carb space. However,
perhaps, yeah.
You were.
Carry on.
However, you are, of course, more than just low carb, and of recent, like in the last month or so, the What the Fat book entity has come out with What the Face.
Yes, it is. It is still low carb philosophy.
Yeah.
Because of course, in my world, low carb philosophy is really just whole food.
Yeah.
Like, my philosophy has always been, if you truly do low carb, healthy fat, let me start the other way around. If you truly eat whole food, it'll end up being a lower and healthier carb than maybe our guidelines would guide us, and it will be slightly higher in fat content than our guidelines would recommend, and probably similar amounts of protein. So it still is centered around that whole food philosophy, but the difference with What the Face is it's really all contextualized to inner and outer health and beauty, but I guess it is beauty, because if you are beautiful on the inside from a health perspective, then that manifests in your skin and how you radiate health on the outside. So it's all about that.
Awesome. And obviously listeners of the show will be able to pick up your book from all major book outlets.
Yep, or on our whatthefatbook.com website.
Awesome.
Where all our books are. And they are in, your standard bookstores. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what people get out of it.
And tell me, Caryn, then, what is your favourite recipe from What the Face?
I'll
tell you what I did see.
Favorite? Yes, what did you see?
I saw a jam bayala recipe.
Oh yes, yeah, that is pretty cool. There was one that
I will have to tell you though, I will never eat it. I'll never make it because I've been tarnished. The Jambayella has been tarnished for me after doing it multiple times when I did Weight Watchers.
Oh, no, really?
Like about 25 years ago. That was their favourite recipe. I'm like,
no.
oh my God, it's that. And Kedgeree, I'm never going.
Kedgeree.
That and Kedgeree, I'm never going to go near. But anyway.
You know, I'm going to cheat and actually say one of my favourite recipes is actually, we've repeated this in this book. It's actually come from our fasting book, our What the Fast book. And it's the poke bowl, salmon poke bowl with kimchi. So that's so in our What the Fast book, we had just the salmon poke bowl. But in this book, we've added kimchi to it because our recipes really all mimic the nutrition strategies that we use throughout the book. So kimchi being a fermented food comes into one of our chapters when we talk about gut health.
Nice.
And I love kimchi.
Do you?
And I love sauerkraut. I was brought up on sauerkraut, so it's not a new thing for me.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. So the salmon poke bowl with all the little entities in it.
Oh, delicious.
You know, the omega-3s from the salmon, and I love it.
Oh, that sounds delicious.
Yeah.
And now, Caryn, before we go on and address some of the questions that we have got today, which I know you sourced from your Facebook page, which is awesome. Can you just chat to me a little bit about how it's been for you, how it's changed for you over time? So it might be almost 7 or 8 years since we sort of got into this low carb space. And I know that from a dietitian perspective, from a practitioner perspective, that you've had your challenges. Can you sort of talk me through, if you don't mind, just sort of how that's evolved over time?
Yeah, interesting, because it's probably coming up 8 years, and in the beginning it was a real drama in my head. Firstly, before we shifted, and I remember being at work and this sort of dominated conversation, and I was like totally anti and. Oh no, I'm going to prove you all wrong, and to try to do some reading around it. I'm like, oh my God, I can't prove you all wrong. and it kind of spiraled from there. But when the book came out, when we sort of shifted our philosophies, there was a lot of upheaval, particularly in the dietetic community and the dietetic authorities and things, and so there was a bit of hard time during the first couple of 2 or 3 or 4 years, probably about 3 years or so, and a lot of pushback, and slowly but surely things have changed quite substantially. So a lot of I know dietitians often get labeled as conservative and old school, and sure, so some of us are. Everyone in every profession, there's some old schools and there's some newbies, and things change, but there's definitely been movement, and people are more open to doing low carb. There's more science coming every single day, particularly with diabetes. So that's, for me, that's a bit of a no-brainer, really. And the American Diabetes Association and the Canadian Diabetes Association have really adopted low carb and very low carb, aka keto, as an effective or an efficacious therapeutic approach alongside some of the others to manage type 2 diabetes. And I think it's only a matter of time before it sort of stretches into type 1, because it's similar but different, but it's the same concept about blood sugar control. Yeah, for sure. So there's been a lot of adoption of this by lots of health professionals over the last few years. And I almost feel like when you ride the wave, I almost feel like I'm sort of surfing down the other end of the wave. I feel like it's almost mainstream for a lot of people now. But then every now and again you're reminded of when you see things in the blogosphere and the Twitter sphere and the media, and particularly on TV, you know, those TV programs about mainstream nutrition management, and you go, oh gosh, maybe we haven't quite got there.
Yeah.
But I think, to cut a long story short, there was a lot of opposition at the start, but I don't feel like there's much of that now.
Do you know, I'm always surprised at some of the questions that we get, not necessarily the questions today, in fact not the questions today that we'll be chatting about, but just sort of I get online or I hear from clients and stuff, which I understand what you're saying is, you know, with regards to, is it coming more mainstream? Are we sort of at the other end of it, that, you know, this is just accepted as a viable strategy, another way of doing things? However, just with the questions that we get, sometimes I also think we just live in a little bit of a bubble.
Yeah.
And that's what how do we know this? Like I talk to people about something which I feel has been kind of in media, in the online space for years and years and years, and it should be as simple as 1 + 1 = 2, but it still isn't. Yeah,
no, you're right. And, you know, every now and again, you know, my clients, we've all got a certain type of clientele. My clients that come to see me kind of know what I do. Yeah. So I don't have to spend a whole lot of time trying to convince them about this way. And I had a client this week, actually, and I said, you know, I'm involved with I'm an advocate of low carb whole food. Do you know much about that? And he said, oh no, I didn't know that. And I felt like saying, buddy, are you living under a rock? And then I thought, no, maybe I'm living in a bubble. Yeah. Because all the people who come to me know what I do, but it doesn't mean the whole world does that. It just means my little clientele does. So you can get caught up in your own little world there, for sure. But I think, I still think every now and again you see it. You see people who used to be anti talking about lower carb, and you go, oh, okay, that's not how you used to talk. So things are changing, which is quite pleasing. And I think also, Mikki, you and I have always been, we've always kind of got the whole low carb thing from a spectrum perspective. So I think some people default to, you know, low carb equals keto equals no carb, and that's the way it needs to be for everyone. And you and I have always been, well, you know, it's good for these people. Maybe you have a little bit more carb for this group. Maybe you have a little less carb for that group. And I think that's really important to remember. It's not just a low carb, high fat for all. In fact, it might not even be high fat at all. You know, it might be slightly higher, but not high. For some groups. Nice.
That's a really good summary of your approach, I think, and both of ours, and people who listen to me probably are aware that that's my approach as well. I feel like sometimes we get tainted with a bit of a brush.
Totally.
Of, totes keto, totes low carb. You know, not at all open to doing something, you know, different or higher carb or that kind of thing. Just because people like things to fit in a box.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did this activity with my AUT students just the other week. They were my third year nutrition students, and they were cooking an healthy outdoor meal for the outdoor students in the outdoor classroom, which is this literal, like, you know, classroom built with bamboo and stuff outside, which is just brilliant. So they did their healthy meal, which was great, and then they brought out the outdoor students made some dessert. They had this damper, which is literally flour and water, and they stuck it onto this bamboo, around this piece of bamboo, and put it on the open fire. And of course, you know, they offered it to me. Do you want some? Stuck a Kit Kat in the middle. Do you want some? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll have some. And my students looked at me as if, oh my God, I thought you were, you know, only keto. Do you actually eat carbs? And, you know, are you actually going to eat this flour? I'm like, yeah. You know, there's this impression that we're so hardcore for what we eat and what we tell everyone to eat. But the reality is probably a little different. Not saying that we're high carb junkies, but, you know, moderate people that do stuff as the situation calls for it.
Totally. Although, Caryn, if you've just told me you've had damper and Kit Kat, I think you probably need to do Just Think About It June.
just think about it, June. Sign me up. Sign me up.
Because it's a little bit too late for Mindful May now. You would have missed half of it.
Admittedly, I might do Kit Kat and Damper once a year, and that's about it.
Okay, so you asked some of your Facebook peeps.
Yes.
Just some general questions, because you knew that you and I could have probably quite a good convo around some of these, and you've selected, a few here which we've got in front of us.
Yeah, and they're quite varied.
Yeah, which is great. So, shall we kick off with the first one?
Yeah.
Awesome. Caryn, where do you buy bulk collagen from?
Okay, so I didn't know this off the top of my head, so I had a little bit of a search, and to be honest, I don't know where you can buy bulk collagen amounts for very cheap, like factory price kind of bulk collagen, but you can buy collagen in bulk from bulk bin places, but the price is going to be probably the same price point as you would get buying collagen from a container, or probably a bit better because you don't actually have the container costs as well. Then that's the beauty of bulk bins. But with collagen, I would have to say that it's pricey wherever you get it from. In my little sphere of knowledge, there's I don't know where you'd get it cheaply, and hopefully that answers the question. But certainly, if you find it, can you let me know, please?
And I imagine that collagen features in your Facebook.
It does actually. We I might just elaborate on that a little bit. One of our key sections in our book is the 7 food foundations, and one of them is protein, and we talk about the 3 protein sisters that are involved in skin health and hair and nails and all the sort of building blocks. So you've got keratin, collagen, and elastin, and collagen is it is your kind of your cement, or your kind of scaffolding, and it sort of degrades as we age, sadly. And there's a lot of hype about, let me just chuck back a whole lot of collagen and my skin will look amazing. So I went into quite a bit of depth researching that, and pleasingly I did find that there is a little bit of evidence to support taking collagen and skin health, and also wound healing, but the mechanism is not really known. Is it the collagen itself, or is it just the fact that you are having slightly more protein overall in your diet? Because of course when you eat collagen, the amino acids, the collagen kind of disassembles into your amino acids and then reassembles into your protein in your skin and all that, and we don't really know if it's directed to the site that it needs to be at, but there is some evidence to suggest that it is. So I think if anyone is looking at doing the best for themselves, obviously protein, and we might talk about protein a little bit later, protein really needs to be looked at as a whole, the amount of protein as a whole. But if you want to go the extra mile and throw some actual collagen powder into your yogurt or into wherever you put it, it's not going to do any harm, and it might have a beneficial effect on your skin. So yeah, I'm a fan, as long as it doesn't put you out of pocket and you can't buy, you think vegetables are too expensive because you're spending all your money on collagen. But if you do prioritize your money towards collagen, I think it would be worthwhile. Yeah,
that's great. And I just spoke to Stu Phillips this week actually, and we addressed collagen because he blew up the internet with his post about the fact that what we know about collagen, or what people say about collagen, is a load of bollocks. He of course clarified that though, and he's very much, you and him are very much on the same page as to what the evidence shows. And in fact, the fact that you had said, right now there isn't any sort of head-to-head studies looking at collagen versus just protein, except of course he did say that on Twitter. He also posted that there is this one research lab out of somewhere who have just published 4 papers showing that collagen was as effective as whey, or more effective for certain things, but he doesn't necessarily believe it. And in fact, because of course collagen is low in that leucine that you and I were having a convo about.
Yeah, so is it just that they need more leucine, and do you get an independent benefit from collagen when you look at other things? It depends on what they were looking at in the study.
That's exactly right. And because I, like you, when there was something on Fair Go a few months ago that basically dismissed collagen out of hand, and I'm like, that is not how I understand it. So I did a bit of a dive in the literature as well, and saw that there was a lot of good evidence to suggest its usefulness in terms of wound healing and skin health.
And also soft tissue injury. I think there's a study that showed that there was an improvement in soft tissue injury in athletes. And again, it wasn't a randomized controlled trial, I don't think.
No.
But, it's one of those supplements that if there's a little bit of evidence, then why not give it a go?
And it's that individual variation that you and I talked about, because earlier, and Stu and I talked about that as well, is that, lots of people saw his post and got very upset because for them, collagen has really helped improve pain-associated symptoms with osteoarthritis in the knee and things like that. And Julianne Taylor, a good friend of both of ours, said that she, in fact, totally notices when she doesn't take collagen on that front. So I feel like there's just with everything in nutrition,
absolutely,
individual variation.
Totally. And of course, you don't have to buy a collagen supplement if you are literally having very gelatinized bone broth every single day. But to get those like the proline, the hydroxyproline, the glycine, the glutamine, to get all those things out of the bone broth, it's got to be really like gel-like, full of gelatin. And I'm not sure a lot of the bone broths are.
Yeah.
I just think it's a personal thing. I think it's an easy supplement that goes into a lot of meals.
Yeah.
That if you throw in an extra 10 or 20 grams of protein, it's all good.
It is good. And I guess the last thing to just clarify is that it would not be a replacement for other protein powders.
Of course not. No, absolutely
not.
No,
and I think that's where some people get a little bit confused, is that your collagen powder is in addition to your whey protein isolate or your plant protein, for example.
Exactly. And that's what I have for my breakfast most mornings, actually. I have a little bit of berries, and then I have my natural Greek yogurt, which I'm playing around with as well, different types of yogurts. And then I throw my 2 heaped teaspoons of collagen and my 2 very heaped tablespoons of just standard whey or sometimes pea. I kind of go between the two. And then a few kind of flaky things on top. And honestly, like, it's a protein hit. I absolutely love it. And I'm a big fan of vanilla.
Yes.
So it's vanilla protein powder and vanilla collagen, marine-based collagen, and that seriously could last me a large part of the day. It's very, very satiating.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Love
and
it.
You have the other thing that you tried in addition to the PSMF bread was my carrot pumpkin protein loaf.
Yes,
love
it. I really like these protein-based loaves because I think for people who are just snacking, we both think snacking is not ideal if you are trying to curb your weight and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes you just feel like something. And I think if it can be a protein-based snack, that's where I would steer my snacking. And sometimes, you can have boiled egg or a piece of meat. But of course, if you wanted to have something loaf-like, that's not a high sugar biscuit or something, I think these loaves really do the trick.
Totally. And this one that I made today was a substitute for the Zote bar, and you will find both recipes on my website, listeners, for you to, if you're interested. What people on the Mondays Matter program love about the Zote bar is its volume. They cannot get through an entire slice, and so they end up shaving off a bit and saving it for afternoon tea. And again, like you, whilst I'm not as much of a fan of snacking for most people, at the end of the day, if it's helping them adhere to their approach by having something on hand to have rather than like a Snickers bar, I'm all for it. Awesome, Caryn, thank you. So now the second question is it's quite a big question actually, but what are the recommendations for diet for autoimmune conditions?
Yeah, that is a big question. Well, no, it's a little question, but it's a big answer.
Yeah.
And how can I kind of contextualize? I guess there's the I don't want to say gold standard, but the most extreme, I guess, of all the diets that I've come across for autoimmune conditions is the autoimmune protocol. And I find that really, really strict. And for people who don't know what is being restricted there, so you've got grains, you restrict dairy, you restrict eggs, nuts and seed, nightshades, which is your aubergine and peppers. Gosh, I'd be hopeless because I'm loving peppers at the moment.
Yeah.
Potatoes, tomatoes, and some like spices like paprika and cayenne pepper and things. And there's more. Alcohol, coffee,
chocolate,
seed oils, refined carbs, legumes. So people out there are probably wondering, well, actually, what can I eat? Meat, vegetables, some fruits, so and good quality oils. So it is very extreme, and I guess the idea is to remove any aggravating food that's going to cause an immune response or an immune response at the level of the gut. And there is some evidence around AIP and things like rheumatoid arthritis and certain autoimmune conditions. It's not that well researched. From a client perspective, I always start with eliminating some of the main aggravating factors and see if there's some improvement. And then you build on that over time. I just think going straight to AIP is pretty tough.
It is tough.
And it also depends on the level of strife the person is in, what they're struggling with, and what that looks like in terms of symptoms, and what they can live with and what they can't live with.
Yeah, and I'd agree. And in fact, the most extreme elimination approach would be carnivore.
Yeah, you're right, actually. For sure.
I feel like that's actually would be easier.
Exactly, it would be easier because it's just
meat and salt.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and that is it. Except I know of a few people and have guided a few people with that, but that is it. Actually I've sort of changed my mind about AIP over the last few years on the basis of exactly what you described. Can be really challenging to implement, really easy to get wrong, and might not be the best roadmap for sort of coming out of, getting back to a place where you can enjoy a better or a bigger variety of foods. And in part, this has been directed by Dr. Michael Ruscio. He has a fabulous book, Healthy Gut, Healthy You, and it's really client friendly as well. So anyone who is interested in gut health and approaching an autoimmune protocol, I would highly recommend his book. It's like a little workbook, but he is very much more of that sort of moderate, let's go for the low-hanging fruit. Yeah, you might start with a 3-day bone broth fast just to kind of reduce down that inflammation initially. But then, do you really need to cut out those nuts and seeds? Do you really need to look at those spices, or, get rid of every single phytochemical in your diet?
Yeah, because you've got to look at what you're left with.
Yeah.
And you also got to look at the consequences of taking out some of these key foods from a nutrient, but also, as you say, phytochemical perspective. So, autoimmune is all about elimination, but it's a spectrum of elimination. And I always start, as you say, with the low-hanging fruit, probably the grains. A lot of people struggle with nightshades, so maybe grains, nightshades, dairy, based on conversations and symptoms and things. I always try and keep eggs in there, because I just think eggs are so good, and people really struggle taking eggs out. We go from there. Yeah. So it's not a fixed answer, and I know I went straight to AIP, but I would probably use AIP in like 2% of my clients with autoimmune, just because let's try a whole lot of other stuff before we have to go there.
Yeah, totally. Because of course the amount of planning and preparation and consideration in an AIP would increase stress levels,
which would make matters worse.
Totally. It would totally offset could potentially offset some of those, potential like the 1% improvements. And, if anyone is, really interested in AIP or in autoimmune approach for things like rheumatoid or osteoarthritis, I highly recommend your MPhil student.
Yes,
Julianne Taylor.
Yeah, she's doing her study on exactly that.
Yeah,
and
she's got a lot of great information as well on her blog. Some real kind of step-by-step kind of blog posts and things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing some of those outcomes.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, Caryn, what to eat when you have a sweet craving on keto? And can I actually just start off by saying,
go for it.
It's actually fine if you do have sweet cravings on keto. There are a few reasons for it, but it's actually okay.
Yeah, and I think people are under the impression that if you go on keto, it is the savior to everything in your life.
I know.
Your weight, it will solve your weight issues. It will solve your blood pressure, your blood sugar issues. It will solve your cravings.
Yeah, and regulate your appetite.
Absolutely. And I think for some people it absolutely does that, but for others not so much. And I've had people thinking that something's wrong, or they haven't done keto properly because they still get cravings.
Yeah.
No one really understands the full physiological mechanism behind cravings.
Yeah.
And of course, you and I know it's probably tied into, the emotional health of the individual as well. So getting back to the question, what to eat when you have a sweet craving? Well, it's interesting because it's like, well, do you suggest something like, not an artificial, a naturally sweetened treat, like a keto treat that will give you that kind of something with stevia or natvia, and that will give you that kind of sweet edge? Or do you just kind of hang in there? And I think that depends on what level of addiction you have to certain foods, particularly sweet foods. And we do have a PhD student at the moment, Eloise Neely, and she's doing her PhD on food addiction, but with a focus on sugar and carb addiction. And we are going to be looking at the sort of spectrum of people that have these addictions and what that actually means. Is it just is it, if you have something sweet, do you go down that rabbit warren of just eating everything in sight, and it unravels you for the next few days or weeks, and you can't really function? Or is it the thing that you need for that moment, and you can moderate it, and then you kind of back to normal? So I know for me, I'm a moderator type of individual, and if I have a sweet craving and I have something sweet, I might eat a little bit too much chocolate, but it's not going to unravel me. But there are other people that might have something sweet, and that will be the end of them.
Totally. It's like that difference between kind of buffer and trigger foods.
Yeah.
Foods that either buffer your appetite and sort of satisfy you to the next meal, or they trigger this absolute cascade of just want to eat everything in sight.
Absolutely. I like one of my go-to suggestions is the dark chocolate, maybe on some berries and yogurt thing, because it is sweet. And of course, by the time you are well versed in keto, your palate would have changed anyway. So the dark chocolate still gives you that element of satisfaction, and hopefully that does the trick for many.
Nice. Another couple of options, I think coconut butter can be quite good.
Yeah.
So and for those of you who are not sure of the difference between coconut butter versus coconut oil, it is the flesh of the coconut. You take desiccated coconut, you toast it, and then you blend it, and then it ends up being this delicious, creamy, very easy to overdo though, because it's very highly calorific, which might not suit your keto goals. And I would say as well is that whilst we shouldn't expect all cravings to disappear, if people do have cravings on keto, I would, and I think you and I would be on the same page, have a look at that macronutrient makeup. Like if you really are running low on protein, then that is likely to increase your cravings, because I find this, I don't know about you, Caryn, but particularly in women, like fat is really satisfying for men. But with women, I feel like just that combination of protein and fat just tends to work better in terms of overall kind of appetite regulation.
Totally, 100%. And you'll see it in a smoothie. Like take a smoothie. If you have coconut cream berries, water. It's not going to cut it. Without the protein powder equivalent in there, it's not going to cut it. Whereas I think if you go if you have protein powder and say water or unsweetened almond milk with the berries, so you're missing the fat, you will still get that feeling of fullness, that satiety. So fat. And the literature shows that protein is the most satiating nutrient, really. I think the good thing is maybe not so much protein powder, but say animal foods like meat, fish, chicken, they are going to naturally have fats in them anyway. So you're going to get that sort of dual effect.
Yeah, totally. And then just from a supplement perspective, high-dose chromium is found to be helpful for some people, and I think clinicians in New Zealand and Australia actually have something called high-dose chromium to have after meal. Magnesium can be helpful for some.
Yeah.
And something else, Sarah Wilson likes doing this. She used to say have a teaspoon of coconut oil with a little bit of cinnamon on it and just eat it.
That's so interesting.
It is. I can imagine that would probably dampen down appetite for anything.
Yeah.
Because it's it's got texture, it's got mouthfeel.
Yeah.
It's not sweet, but it's got that bit of cinnamon, which has a hint of sweet.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if you're getting a lot of cravings on keto, you really need to address why you are doing keto.
Oh yeah.
And if you truly need to do keto for neurological outcomes or neurological outcomes would be the logical one.
Yeah.
Then if you're on keto and I'm not saying just to trivialize, but only for weight control or blood sugar regulation, maybe keto is not working for you, because of course you've got to look at everything else that's going on. You've got to look at the stress response, and that could be linked in with craving. So it's more than just have some magnesium. It's like, let's look at the bigger picture here.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's great. Awesome, Caryn. Okay. Keto and menopause. That's a big question, isn't it? Big topic.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly is.
Yeah. So are there any difference in how you approach keto for menopause from a macro perspective, in terms of does your macronutrient makeup change if you're doing keto for menopause versus keto for other reasons?
Yeah, and I think this leads into the comments that you had earlier. I'm really hot on protein for any female that's 40-ish and over, so pre-menopause, menopause, and onwards. And that's because you want to actually set up the next stage of your life, so you're going to have optimal muscle mass.
Yeah.
And we know that when you have declining hormones, that has a flow-on effect on muscle retention and muscle building, or the ability to build muscle. And yeah, I just find that you can get a lot better outcomes with a higher protein macronutrient profile rather than moderate protein, high fat. So you've got these three macronutrients to play around with, and then of course when it comes to calories, you've got alcohol in there as well.
Yeah,
it's not a macronutrient, but it's got a calorific value. And I think that I see too many people who are doing very low carb, very high fat, too low protein.
Yeah.
And I think definitely by upping the protein, dropping the fat, not down to low fat guidelines, but just getting it down from 70% down to maybe 50-ish percent.
Yeah.
And possibly even lifting the carbs a little bit. I find that to be the optimal combination for a lot of people, for a lot of females.
Nice.
And with some muscle building, of course.
Yeah. And in fact, I heard a stat the other day, actually, on a podcast I was listening to, that between 40 and 50, without intervention, women can lose 2.5 kilos of muscle and gain 2.5 kilos of fat.
That is so scary.
It is, isn't it?
That is so scary.
Yeah. And that's where it is. It's that focus on protein. It's that focus on resistance training, but also stress management.
Absolutely. And that just on that keto and menopause. So I'm obviously a big fan of whole food, low carb. And of course, low carb and keto for menopause, because that's when insulin resistance might hit you if it hasn't hit you before. But I think for some females getting into menopause and perimenopause area, keto might actually be too low carb for them, and you're getting, as estrogen decreases, you might get a lift in cortisol, and then you've got this layer of fat, and women are going, oh my goodness, I need to get rid of this, so they join F45 and they're banging it out on very high intensity exercise 4-5 days a week, and they're doing hardcore keto, and they can't shift an ounce. And actually I find that buttoning off the high intensity and doing more resistance training, again, not high intensity resistance training, but more sort of gentle resistance training, building muscle, keeping the cardiovascular fitness, but not going hard all the time, and lifting the protein and bringing them out of keto and doing more low carb has been helpful.
Yeah, totally. And, also you and I were talking about this before we came on to podcast, just how important it is to look after the brain as we age, and particularly women, and the notion that women should never focus on should never do intermittent fasting, or always need to be well fueled all of the time in terms of like eating across the day. Like these are recommendations for women in menopause, which might not necessarily be advantageous, just due to the fact that we are more at risk of dementia just with the changing hormone levels in the brain. Women have a higher prevalence rate of Alzheimer's, and actually we are unable to utilize glucose in the brain to the same extent as we age. So, and Lara Bryden and I had a good discussion about this, and we can find really good information in her new book, The Hormone Repair Manual,
which I have just started, by the way.
Fantastic. Yeah. It's such a good book. And she talks about having MCT oil and coffee in the morning, maybe fasting until say 10:30, 11, but then again, like you've just said, put that focus is on having protein foods that also deliver good fat as well, which is the animal protein based foods.
Yeah, and interesting, just on that thing for fasting, because I think, when you suddenly you come out, you go, fasting, intermittent fasting is brilliant, this is what it's all about, and then you get more into, well, for certain people it might not be as good, or it might fall down in certain areas, which then translates into a no, women should be fasting, and we can quite easily go the other end, but that's actually not true. Women can fast perfectly well, but it's just how much they fast and what else they do in their diet, in their life to kind of pad that. And I think that's one way. Once the stress response is managed, whatever that means and looks like, you can definitely incorporate some intermittent fasting along with these higher protein strategies, so that you are sort of cycling in and out of ketosis over the week. So you're not living in keto and stressing out whatever system, but you're getting high levels of circulating ketones at sometimes, lower level at other times, and it's sort of becoming, it might become the answer to a lot of questions.
Yeah, nice.
So it's not going that hardcore strategy. It's taking a little bit of this and a little bit of that to get the right combination.
That's great, and because that just really speaks to that concept of metabolic flexibility. And whilst we mentioned it in relation to the gut earlier on, just in terms of all physiological kind of systems and metabolism, the more flexible we can be with using energy.
Absolutely bang on. And like in the sports nutrition situation, when you go high carb, low fat, and suddenly you go keto, you're actually going from a place where you are metabolically inflexible to another place where you are metabolically inflexible. So you go from using carbs only mainly, to a place where you're using fat only mainly. And that metabolic flexibility comes over time, and with maybe some carb cycling. So it's that, and I'm not trying to go, let's go middle ground here, but it's how you strategically get there to make your body metabolically flexible for what you're trying to achieve.
It's periodization, right? Yeah, like you do with training.
Exactly.
Lovely. Okay, Caryn, what do you know about low carb diets and the effects that they have for hypertension or high blood pressure?
Well, I know that they can be very beneficial, actually. And that's really to do with insulin. So when you drop the carbs, you drop the insulin, and insulin has a renal sodium retention mechanism. So when you decrease that circulating insulin, it sort of lets go to some of that sodium. And in fact, there was a study that David Unwin just tweeted a couple of days ago. David Unwin, the UK GP, a low carb GP, and they looked at, this was a survey, it wasn't an RCT or anything, but it was a survey of around 2,000, just over 2,000 people. They took, they divided them into salt sensitive and non-salt sensitive people, and they looked at the association between, they looked at fasting blood sugar levels. And what they really found was that it was a dose dependent effect, and the people who were not salt sensitive tended to have a lower fasting blood sugar.
Oh, interesting.
And again, they didn't really talk about the mechanisms too much, but and of course it's association, and we know association-based studies sometimes get us into trouble. But it's a nice plausible mechanism that with a lower fasting blood sugar, you've got a lower insulin, and maybe you don't have any hyperinsulinemia or insulin resistance going on, and the outcome there is a lower level of blood pressure.
Yeah, nice.
So quite a nice little study. And we know that in practice it works.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I had a client several years ago, and he came to me to drop a little bit of weight and potentially to drop blood pressure, but he said his doctor mentioned that he would always be on medication. So I said, well, here's an option for you. Talked about low carb and said, listen, just be very careful and talk to your doctor. If you get a little bit lightheaded, you might need to, and you will likely need to, adjust your medication in the downward direction. But talk to your doctor, work with your doctor. And he said, yeah, no, I appreciate that, but it'll never happen. The doctor said, I'll never get on blood pressure medication. Fast forward a few weeks, he'd only lost about 3 Ks, and he ended up passing out in the kitchen.
Oh, jeez.
I know. And went to the doctor, and the doctor was going, oh, your blood pressure is really low. So, it's logical to us because we kind of work with it all the time. But I do think because it can have a very profound effect on lowering blood pressure, people need to work with their health professionals if they're on medication and be open to the fact that their blood pressure might drop.
Yeah, interesting. And I see that as well, in that it isn't necessarily just about weight, because usually with weight loss, regardless of how you lose weight, your blood pressure will drop, which is one of the biggest benefits. But low carb does have a really profound effect on blood pressure, and certainly is one of the things which both of us would suggest trying if that's your main outcome. And it should be. Hypertension's an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's massive, and it's a silent symptom.
It is, totally. You wouldn't know it. But what I get confused about as well is that whole talking about salt sensitive individuals, salt sensitive high blood pressure. Well, how would you know if you're salt sensitive? If you go on a low carb diet and your blood pressure drops, well then you're not salt sensitive. So
yeah, it's interesting. As I understand it, there are it's really playing around with how does your body respond to sodium. And one of the recommendations to find out is if you're truly salt sensitive, it does mean that if you do up the salt in your diet, you'll have an appreciable effect on your blood pressure.
Absolutely.
But it's it's fewer people than what we think.
And I think that's the thing, because it's just been normal practice to put people on blood pressure meds and to say go low salt. But I think this was definitely before the whole low carb thing came on the radar. And if you look at the studies, blood pressure is definitely one of those outcomes that can benefit from low carb.
Yeah, nice. That's awesome, Caryn. So Caryn, what is your recommendation, this is completely changing gear now, for a 20-year-old male who's trying to bulk up? What are your dietary recommendations for someone like that?
Eat more.
Pretty simple, eh?
Well, actually, I like to think it is simple, but it isn't simple, because I have had clients that just struggle to put on weight just because they don't. And other people who are trying to lose weight, they're so lucky if you're trying to put on weight. But it's just as hard for those people to put on weight as it is for other people to lose weight. Well,
there is that genetic component too, right?
Absolutely, yeah, totally. And I think again, the same as the weight loss outcome. If you lose, we'll start with weight loss. If you lose 5 kilos, then you need 5 kilos less calories to maintain that.
Yes.
And you can't suddenly then eat more and expect to weigh the same. It's the same with weight gain. So if you suddenly up your dietary intake by 1,000 calories a day and you get to put on 5 Ks, you then need to carry on with that level of calories. And if your appetite's not great and you drop back down to that 2,000 calories or whatever, that weight will drop. So I think I would, for a 20-year-old boy, I would seriously look at protein as that would be the first nutrient I'd look at. And let's make sure you're getting adequate protein for what they're trying to do. And then it's really a calorie game. So carbs, fat, even for someone who's trying to bulk up, I don't think that it's valuable going 80% carbs.
No.
I would go good quality carbs as much as you need, and then the rest fat. So it's kind of the same philosophy, but with a definite calorie focus.
For sure. And for people I've worked with who are hard gainers, I feel like one of the first things you have to do is manage expectations.
Yeah.
Let's see, can you actually gain a kilo over the next month? And I feel like for a lot of people that should be an achievable outcome, because of course if the gain that we want is muscle, you will always gain fat as well, but you want to minimize. It really depends. Like if you're just hard out want to bulk, then you're going to have to be happy with the fact that it's muscle and fat.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is no way around that. And yes, there is a way to minimize that fat gain, but let's just say it was for bulking for this purposes, it's just bulk. I feel like timing is the other aspect as well. So just being in timing from a making sure you're gaining those calories. So get those liquid calories in and around training.
Absolutely. And you know what, if I had a client and they were eating well, okay, so they were eating 3 meals a day with a couple of snacks here and there, and they were eating good quality food, it would be so easy, because you just bang in 2 protein shakes, liquid calories, as you say, in and around training, and another time where probably when they are, like with breakfast, when they are eating already and they're not, their appetite allows for it, you do that consistently, and there we go. But if you start with someone, 20-year-old male, someone who's like a junk food addict, and then you tidy up their diet, it becomes a lot trickier, because there's risk that they might lose weight in tidying up their diet. But then it's like, throw some smoothies in there as well. So it's a lot easier when someone starts from a good quality standpoint.
Totally. And of course the easy calories to get, as you mentioned, in terms of fat, would be adding olive oil to salads and vegetables.
Absolutely.
Nuts
and avocado.
Seeds.
Isn't avocado just the best thing to add good calories?
Totally. And coconut cream to those smoothies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, adding it to yogurt as well, if you're having yogurt with your breakfast, things like that.
I find often all the things that, I suggest to my middle-aged women to take care of to make sure that they don't gain weight, like handfuls of nuts and seeds. Like seriously calorific. That's what the 20-year-old boy should be eating.
Totally. I totally agree. Now we've just got a note here about oxalates, Caryn.
Yes. Oxalates, it's an interesting one, because oxalates, people say don't really worry too much about oxalates because of risk of kidney stones. Well, how would you know if you've got a high risk of kidney stone? Well, unless you had kidney disease in the family, or you've had a kidney stone, you kind of wouldn't know that.
I feel like people are just worrying about things they don't need to be worrying about. I
totally agree.
If we come right back to what you said at the outset, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because if you look at the foods that have oxalates, like we're talking about leafy greens and those kind of good quality foods that we get a lot of our nutrients, our micronutrients from. So if you are, trying to, decrease your foods that have oxalates, what are you not eating as well? And I think it's fair to say that there are a group of people who don't do well on plants, like, circling back to our carnivore story, a very small group of people who find that these compounds in foods like phytates and oxalates can be pretty harmful to their health, then absolutely take them out. But don't go looking for a problem where there isn't one.
Yeah, and I've had a number of people who kind of pop up on social media and they're like, I've now just removed oxalates from my diet. And I'm like,
why?
Yeah, did you notice it that you were experiencing negative kind of symptoms? And they're like, well, no, I've just heard it's just not a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. However, if you do have risk of kidney stones, or you've got good reason to decrease oxalates, I do know that kale and bok choy are 2 leafy greens that are low in oxalates.
So we are low.
Yeah, I know, surprisingly.
Yes.
And so also low in oxalates, cashew nuts, walnuts, pumpkin and sunflower seeds. Pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds.
Oh.
So it's not all bad.
No.
But, spinach, like we just had on our delicious lunch earlier, spinach leaves are very high in oxalates. So I'd be a bit gutted if I had to take out my spinach leaves.
No, so would I. Awesome. So really, bottom line then, Caryn, is that we know that too much oxalate may lead to kidney stones in people who are susceptible. But for the majority of people who enjoy the types of foods which might contain oxalates, if you're not experiencing any symptoms from the oxalates, they probably don't need to worry.
Exactly.
Okay, no, that's awesome advice. That's great.
And I think if you do have risk of kidney stones, it's really important to make sure that you stay well hydrated. I think hydration is one of those things that we can sort of forget about.
Yeah.
Which, might make us hungry and it might mask dehydration, might mask other things.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Focusing on not over drinking, but just being mindful that you are well hydrated.
Nice. I love it. Now, what about if we change tacks again? And of course, this is just a sort of almost like a nutrition smorgasbord with the types of questions that we got. Foods that affect thyroid. What are thyroid-friendly foods and what aren't? And how worried do we need to be about these?
Well, it's kind of an interesting question because, again, if there's nothing wrong, you don't really go looking for it. But of course, what we know is that iodine is a mineral which is important for the thyroid, important for making thyroid hormones. So in a kind of normal, healthy individual, we should be mindful that we get enough iodine in our food. So iodine-rich foods are typically seafoods. Seaweed is a great source of iodine, so nori sheets.
Yes,
Make
love
sure
it.
you don't get them with seed oils in them.
Yeah.
And so, fish, dairy products, so, milk and yogurt and things, eggs, nuts, those are really good sources of iodine. And, of course, iodized salt. So making sure that you have a diet that's replete in iodine. And then, I don't believe that there are any foods that really harm or help the thyroid when it's not sitting in a problematic place, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I think if you have something like Hashimoto's or some autoimmune thyroid issues, then you'd really go through not a thyroid food-related strategy, more of an autoimmune food-related strategy to help, and it definitely does. So I think that is how I would respond to that question. Some people talk about brassicas to avoid for goiter. So brassica vegetables are you get these compounds called goitrogens. And goitrogens are compounds that really prevent the uptake of iodine into the thyroid for the synthesis of thyroid hormones. And brassicas like what are the brassicas? Broccoli and cabbage and Brussels sprouts, that can be problematic. But to be honest, like goiter is a thing of old, unless you've got a specific diagnosed reason to avoid brassicas. I again, it's one of those things I wouldn't, because again, you're doing yourself a disservice by not getting all those amazing nutrients that you'd be getting from your brassicas. So if you've got a normal healthy thyroid, then I wouldn't be avoiding those foods.
Yeah, and as I understand it, like the amount, for most people, the goitrogen content of those brassica vegetables doesn't change thyroid function with normal healthy thyroid. And I feel like that's something that we used to think that was possibly a problem, but now we're sort of more aware. There's more kind of research to suggest that for most people it's not an issue. And I guess I'll just add to that in that, if you do have a suboptimal thyroid, then do dig a little bit deeper, have a look at your antibodies, have a look at your iron status as well, because that can play a part in suboptimal thyroid function. And then also thinking about selenium would be the only other one.
Yeah, totally.
Well, there's probably loads of other ones actually, but the one that just kind of springs to mind as well.
Yeah, thyroid's one of those topics that you can just go through rabbit warrens, really.
Yeah, totally.
Super interesting. And of course, the main reason for that is that they're so interconnected to all the other systems in the body as well.
Yeah.
So it's not
like
just
everything.
thyroid. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Nice. And then finally, Caryn, is there a place in sustained weight loss for pea-based plant protein shakes?
I'm sure there is. I mean, we talked about optimizing protein.
Yeah.
And protein has a particularly important place in the world of weight loss, because of course it gives you that satiety. Whether you get it from whey or pea or animal or plant, that doesn't really matter, as long as you have optimized those amino acid combinations, and as long as you're in calorie deficit so you can lose your weight, then I'm sure there's a place.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what, like Stu Phillips and I had a discussion around plant protein versus animal protein, and when those proteins are isolated the way that you find in plant protein powders, like they can be equally as helpful for muscle protein synthesis. And if you love your balanced plant protein,
which we do,
and they're going to contribute to your overall protein load for all of the benefits that protein provides, boom, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Lovely. That's those questions done. I just love these types of questions, Caryn, because they provide us with this little bit of a platform to not only answer questions, but they then kind of springs from it just other things that spring to mind, so people get a little bit of an insight into how you and I think,
which is very alike. We've always thought we've always been on the same page with a lot of the stuff.
Agree. We
need to find something that we disagree on. We'll think about it, hey?
There will be something. I'm just trying to think right now. I know there's something.
There must be something.
Yeah.
We'll get back to you on that.
We'll get back to you, yes. So now, where can people find you? For those people who might not already know.
Right. So I'm an old school girl. I'm on Facebook.
Yeah.
Caryn Zinn Dietitian. I'm not on Instagram, although my dog is Pepper Vizsla, if you like dogs.
I love the pictures
Hungarian
of Pepper.
Vizsla. Yeah, she loves being on Instagram.
Yeah.
But I'm not on Instagram, but I'm on Facebook and I'm on Twitter, Caryn Zinn, and of course, good old-fashioned email.
Awesome. Lovely, Caryn. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was fun, and we will definitely do this again.
I look forward to it.
Team, hope you enjoyed that. And look, Caryn is super easy to find over on Facebook at Caryn Zinn Nutrition. So reach out to her if you've got any questions or you want to book a consultation with her. She is easily available. And next week on the podcast, I was lucky enough to sit down with Professor Julia Rutledge. Now, Professor Rutledge is at Canterbury University here in New Zealand, and she has spent the last 20 years focusing on nutrients for mental health. So Julia and I do a deep dive into that, in addition to talking about her book, The Better Brain, which I cannot recommend enough. So we talk about a lot of things which some people might find a little bit controversial on the mental health front, but Julia is such a wealth of information, and I really recommend that you check out her book and also look forward to this conversation. Until then, team, you can find me over on Twitter and Instagram at Mikki Williden, over on Facebook at Mikki Williden Nutrition, and of course on my website, mikkiwilliden.com. Alrighty, have a great week. See you later.